first, is the government too soft on criminals? Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has unveiled plans to overhaul Britain's sentencing system. She says simply building more prisons is not the answer. Have a listen.
The review was tasked with addressing the fact that our prisons too often create better criminals, not better citizens. Instead of cutting crime, they are breeding grounds of it. The recommendation set out above will see more community punishment, Mr. Speaker, and for that reason, it is essential that it works.
Now, let's run through some of the key announcements, and here they are. First is allowing prisoners, here it is, to earn early release through good behaviour and taking part in rehabilitation programmes. Some criminals could end up only serving 1/3 of their sentence. The next bit that was announced by Shabana Mahmood was scrapping short sentences altogether. So that means sentences of less than a year, they would go. They're given out for low-level offences like theft, driving whilst disqualified and drug offences. What's next on the menu? Well, it would be recall. That's where you're out on licence, you get out and you've done something wrong and they take you back to prison. That would be set for 56 days. Previously, there was no cap. Then we come on to community punishments. And here we have some of the suggested: a travel and football ban, and perhaps even offenders' assets being seized in circumstances where they haven't previously committed a crime where that would automatically trigger. Like, for example, if you commit a drug offence, then it follows that the government apply to take any of your criminal winnings back. But another thing that's made headlines, and this is a controversial one, is, well, fewer women in prison, so more suspended sentences used when, if you're a female defendant and you're facing the law, you shouldn't go to prison. Instead, the sentence should be suspended. That's part of the proposal that's been put before Parliament. And finally, and this is perhaps the most shocking announcement, and the one that I suspect you at home will have a lot of opinions on: chemical castration for sex offenders. Yeah, have a listen to what Shabana Mahmood said about this.
I also asked the review to consider how we manage sex offenders. The review has recommended we continue a pilot of so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal. I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible.
Now, that was the announcement of Shabana Mahmood. I think it's important to go at the beginning and listen to what Robert Jenrick from the Conservative Party in response had to say.
What about the Justice Secretary's plan for most criminals going to jail to serve just 1/3 of their prison sentence there? For her slashing of sentences across the board, discounts so big they'd make Aldi and Lidl blush. I'd call it a joke, Mr. Speaker, if the consequences for the public weren't so terrifying.
You know, Bobby, what do you make of this? Obviously, this is very much in my wheelhouse. One of the things that I noticed was that slashing of 12-month sentences, most criminal cases, I know your brother is a criminal barrister as well. I spend a lot of time as a criminal barrister, 26 years. Most criminal cases are dealt with in the magistrates' courts. Their sentencing power is limited to 6, or if it's consecutive sentences, 12 months. That would mean that if you end up having a case in the magistrates' court, they couldn't send you to prison. That's a pretty, well, some people would say alarming change, not least if you're a victim of crime. What do you think?
Again, Robert Jenrick talked about it being a joke, but I'll tell you what is a joke is the inheritance that the Labour government had in terms of our criminal justice system. So I think that's the bigger picture here, because we've got a criminal justice system that I think is ineffectual and not functional. Again, when someone goes to the police, they're swamped. Then our solicitors, they're overwhelmed. When we go to our barristers, their remuneration is inadequate. When we look at the buildings, the physical infrastructure, the courtrooms, they seem to be crumbling.
Right.
Then our judges, they're given insufficient time.
Just let everybody
Then our prisons, people are waiting so long for their trials. And eventually, if they get a hearing, and the probation system after that is broken. So I think this government is trying to heal the system that's been massively...
Well, are they looking to heal the system, Anne, or are they simply responding to a disastrous, crumbling system, as Bobby describes it, and shrugging their shoulders and saying, we're just going to have to let criminals out? Some people at home will be saying that.
I think very much the latter. I mean, Bobby is right. They inherited a shambles. And that shambles was not the product of any one government. It was the product of successive governments over a very long time indeed. Yes, they inherited a shambles. But I inherited a situation when I was prisons minister. I didn't inherit it, it developed while I was there. When the prison population rose phenomenally, rose by nearly 25%. And my answer wasn't to let people out. My answer was to bring in emergency accommodation. And this government doesn't appear to have looked at that at all. And what worries me is, if you, and you will know this, if you say to people, if you only get up to 12 months, you won't get anything at all, you will know that a lot of people who incur those short sentences have already been through community service probation and have failed.
Right, so just to be clear what you're saying, it means that usually when people are sent to prison for petty crime, it's a last resort. They will have had a fine, it would have been escalated to some sort of community disposal, and then eventually people will say, well, you've crossed the custody threshold, this is a last resort. That's what, it is an experience that lots of barristers and you as prison minister have understood in your time, is that right?
Yes, I mean, that is true. I mean, there are numerous other things there. Not sending somebody to prison simply because she is a woman means not only that a woman could get away with a serious crime, but more important, not more important, but also to be considered is the fact that, of course, criminals know that.
Yep.
And so they're going to ask women to take the risks for them because they're going to say, you won't go to prison, but we will.
Just very quickly, what about stopping crime? You as prisons minister, and everybody understands this, it's not just about punishing people, but rehabilitating.
Yes.
Not because it's in the economic interest of all of us. Short-term sentences don't work because they don't address the fundamental issues why people are committing crime in the first place. So often people go into prison, they come out more dangerous than they went in. You know, I wonder, looking at any of these remedies that are being suggested by the government, whether you think this is going to stop recidivism. Let's Bobby go first and then we'll come to you.
I think scrapping shorter sentences does make sense. Again, I had a chat with my younger brother who's a criminal barrister, and he was saying with short sentences like 3, 6, 9, 12 months, these are people, again, they've committed crimes, small amounts, hopefully things that can be served out in the community, but when they go into prison, so these are people that are like on the edges, minor crimes, again, a crime is a crime, but then they, again, one, it's such a short sentence that the chance of rehabilitation, getting in prisons is minimal. And they're next to people that are hardened criminals that will teach them the ways. So actually, you get people that go back into communities that are worse off criminals than they started off.
Well, one of the suggestions is taking away some of the things that people enjoy, travel and football bans. On top of that,
how are you going to police that?
For sex offenders, there is the suggestion of mandatory instead of, because it's been piloted, optional chemical castration, but people also earning early release. This is the first thing that was announced that I was talking about. And those are people who've committed often serious and violent crimes. So in a moment, we want to hear from you. Do you think Labour is being too soft on criminals? Before the break, Anne, we were talking about whether or not this is going to make any difference to rehabilitation.
I mean, this is the crucial thing. I mean, it really is, because what happens is that as soon as there is any pressure on the prison service, the first casualty are the education programmes, the workshop training, the offending behaviour courses, things like temper management. That is the first casualty of any increase in the prison population. And in the 90s, when we used to set targets for what was then the agency.
Well, you used to set targets.
I used to set targets for the agency that was then running prisons. They asked to reduce the target on purposeful activity in order to accommodate a rise in the population. And I said, no, you won't reduce the target. You won't even keep the target the same. I'm going to raise the target because the message I wanted to send out was, let me get the message.
No, get the message.
The message I wanted to send out was, this is not going to be the first casualty.
So, and can I just tell you why some people at home, and many have got lots of callers on the line, which we're going to come to in a second. Lots of people that I hear, especially who phone in to the show, and we were talking about it yesterday, will go, look, make prison harsh, make it sharp, make it shocking, and above all else, make it nasty, brutish, and if necessary, short. You know, it's a fascinating thing what you're saying is, no, prison has to be somewhere where there's going to be at least some element of helping people once they leave. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Prison is already all those things for the non-hardened criminal. It is a horrible place. If you share a cell, there's a lavatory in the cell. You have to use it with your cellmate there. You very often have to take your lunch into the cell to eat. It is most unpleasant. You have already got brutality, but it comes from other prisoners. and people don't always feel safe. So don't run away with the idea that prison's a holiday camp.
But what you're saying is that when you were prisons minister, you said, look, what I'm not going to get rid of is the things that stop or the things that make people commit crime when they leave. Joined up thinking, make sure they've got somewhere to live, helping them to read, dealing with drug issues and perhaps jobs and also mental health. Very interesting, Anne. I'm going to be fascinated to see what some of the callers think. Let's start with you, Kirsty, in Greater Manchester. I think you want to address one of the policies, which is the suggestion that there might be mandatory castration, chemical castration, for sex offenders. Kirsty, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I just think we need to be looking at preventative measures before things actually happen. And I know that's maybe going to happen if something's already been, an act's already been committed. But just in the future, what could possibly stop them kinds of crimes from reoccurring and things like that in the future, other than something like that? Because that is the root cause of the issue.
Kirsty, just to clarify what you're saying, as I understand it, your view is that, look, if somebody has committed a sex offence, you don't see there being anything wrong with there being a court order which says, look, in order for you to be released from prison, or released from prison early at least, you should undergo chemical castration. Is that right?
100%, yeah. I don't see otherwise what could be done.
Thanks very much, Kirsty. You know, it's an interesting thing, and we'll be coming to the panel on this at some point, that when it comes to child sex offenders, paedophiles, actually there is a voluntary scheme in place, people who actually chose to undergo that procedure, and the recidivism was pretty low. But when it came to rapists, people who had commit sexual violence against women especially, it really didn't make any difference at all, because that fundamentally was a crime, not just a sexual crime, but one also about power, was what researchers have found and discovered after the voluntary scheme. Graham, in Glasgow, what's your view on all of this?
Morning. It's just the government trying to save money. Anne's correct in everything she's just said about prison, and it's more about rehabilitation we need. The chemical castration's a joke. It's just a PR stunt. It only works with victims. Well, perpetrators want to change. It's not worked with anybody who doesn't.
Well, I hear what you say. You know, it's interesting, Graham, to hear you supporting what Anne has to say. I think a lot of people at home would be rather surprised. But often, as I say, you know, people have strong views about prisons until they've spent time in them. And certainly I haven't spent as much time in prison as Anne has, albeit her as a minister, just to be clear. Cassie, you're in London. You've seen the buffet, the raft of ideas that the government are coming up with, not least abolishing 12-month prison sentences, which means that most criminal cases are dealt with in the magistrates' court. All the magistrates will be able to do is say to your person that nicks your mobile phone, the person that perhaps is involved not just in petty crime, but perhaps has breached a court order, for example, driving whilst disqualified. I'm awfully sorry, we don't have any power to send you to prison. Do you think that's a good thing, Cassie, in London?
I think they're in a catch-22 because they have no option but to go down that line as it is now because of the prisons being overridden. But where the government has gone wrong is they are allowing the most dangerous people out because they are repeat offenders. Once you're a sex offender, a child or a rapist attacker, you will not stop. And that is the danger. They should be putting the strict restrictions on keeping them in and not putting petty crime, making it mandatory for them to be castrated. I think the government's made an awful lot of mistakes down the line over the years, right. And this is what's caused the prisons to be overrun. The problem is allowing sex offenders on the street is going to put the public in danger, more danger.
Well, I mean, they're already out. The question is, how do you reduce them offending again? And that's really the underlying purpose of these government announcements yesterday. Jamie, you're in Somerset. What do you make of some, if not all, of what the government is suggesting, not least what our previous caller was suggesting, which is, look, because there's no room in prison, some of the more dangerous offenders are going to be able to get out after only serving a third of their sentence. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that serves victims and justice in general?
No, I don't. And to be honest with you, about when you were saying about, someone saying that they agree with Anne, to be fair, I never agree with Anne anyway. Anyway, but the fact of the matter is, if they do the crime, do the time. But the fact of the matter is there is, for prime example, they accidentally or however they did, they let out a criminal who committed murder 2 days after they let out early. So it's almost like they've people that are being let out early, whether they committed petty crimes or not, low-level crimes or not, and they're let out early, they're just going to think, oh yeah, I could just do it again. And then go in, do half the time, and come back out again and do it again. They're going to think.
I hear you, Jamie.
They're going to get away with it.
Well, one of the conversations that really is at the heart of this, and what Anne was saying, and no doubt Bobby will come on to, is it's all very well to send people to prison if there's room, which there isn't. That's why they're letting people out. But what do you do once they're in? Because eventually they're going to come out and they're going to be our neighbours and members of our community. So how do you spend money appropriately across the prison system to make sure that our streets are safer once these people have served their time? June, you're in Buckinghamshire. Do you think any of this is going to help make our streets safer and make victims also feel like they've been served as well?
No, what I think is that the whole system needs rechanging. I think you should build new prisons, but also odd new prisons on remote Scottish islands for the real nasty murderers.
Sort of like Scottish Alcatraz?
That's kind of, yeah, exactly. And if they earn with good behaviour, they can come back to a normal prison. But a normal prison would be more like a university, so that they have lessons and exams, they have tutors that come in, so they really teach them the way of life, so that when they come out of prison, then they can go into proper jobs. Well,
I hear what you say, June, and there'll be a lot of agreement about that. But I'm going to come to you. Supermax prisons are pretty, to say the least, straitened places if you've ever been into a Category A prison, whether or not it's in an island in Scotland or not. But the second point that June was making about rehabilitation is an interesting one. What do you make of this?
Massively in favour. So I'm actually, in my capacity as an ambassador for the charity The Reading Agency, I'm due to visit some prison libraries to see what work they do in terms of literacy, because part of the reason, again, I teach students, I've been teaching for 11 years. Yeah. Students I've seen that have got onto the wrong side of the law are the ones that tend to have poor numeracy, poor literacy, lack of ability to get into the employment market. So when they get caught up in crime, they go into prisons, and in an ideal world, they get rehabilitated, maybe taught some literacy and numeracy, but they don't get those skills, right. So they feel there's no alternative. So I feel as if prisons were doing their proper work and rehabilitating them, these people wouldn't feel the need to go into crime.
Well, thank you very much, June, for calling in. After the break, we're taking more of your calls. Is the government being tough enough, or are we just letting criminals off easy? Let us know. And we are going to go to some callers in a minute, but I'm going to go to you. You served in the 90s as prisons minister. And when we were chatting in the break, you said that the answer to the problem here is an obvious one. Once you send somebody to prison, so there has to be prison spaces.
Oh, yes.
But once in, what do you say?
Well, I mean, what I've said is that something like 75% of prisoners, for example, who come in are either illiterate or innumerate, or if they're not quite that, they're wholly without qualifications. Now, they shouldn't leave the prison gates in that same state. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, and I can't get this home enough, rehabilitation isn't, and I said this in my conference speech in 1999, all that time ago, I actually said, rehabilitation in prisons isn't some soft, liberal, wet, optional extra. It's a crucial tool of public protection. Because if the man who comes out of prison is as bad and as hopeless as the man who went in, more victims are created, more court costs, more prison costs. I mean, it's so obvious what we have to do. It
may be, but you see, it all comes down to, as Abba said, money, money, money. And
no, it doesn't.
There isn't any. And these are part of the reason why prisoners are being released early.
Can I make a very quick one?
Very quick before I go to Sylvia and Surrey.
You know, I understand that. Really quick. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can have self-financing prison workshops. You can run education through volunteers.
Well, there'll be a lot of people agree with you, but also a lot of victims out there of crime that take the view, look, if you've committed a crime, don't do the time, and prison shouldn't be a place where you learn anything, save to sit in baroque squalor reflecting on what you've done. Sylvia, are you one of those, or do you agree with Anne and perhaps some of the buffet of suggestions being made by the government yesterday?
Well, I think the government's too soft altogether. I think that anybody that commits a crime, doesn't have a British passport, should be straight away sent back to the country of origin, never allowed in to come into this country again, and also all the new people that commit crimes without the British passport should be sent straight back. I know that sometimes it's difficult for the countries don't always want to take them, but I think they should be duty bound. If they're their people, we don't want them here. Well, let's send them back to where they've come from.
Right. So
that's what I say.
If you're a foreign national and you commit a crime, ultimately you should go back immediately. They shouldn't serve any time in a British prison. Bobby, what do you make of that one?
To be honest, I can I'm quite a liberal person in general, but I can sort of see the justification for that in terms of why are taxpayers taking on the burden for citizens that are not of this country for that in terms of if they've committed crime.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons is because the countries of origins won't take them, or in some cases, I've even been involved in some of them, it's because the prison system in the country of origin is so bad that lawyers take a point saying your human rights wouldn't be adequately kept, and our duty to preserve and protect people from being tortured, we wouldn't be able to abide by that if we sent them back to particular countries where the prisons are so dangerous. I mean, that's not saying that's good, but that's one of the reasons lawyers and the court system make clear about the standards required before you can send somebody back. But I'm going to go to you, Linda, in Norfolk. What do you make of all of this? I'm interested, for example, to hear your views on what Anne had to say. Look, the answer is obvious. Send people to prison, but make them more functioning members of society by the time they come out.
Yeah, good morning. Well, the first thing I think is all sex offenders, when they come out, should be tagged and constantly tagged all the time. You can't keep everybody in prison all the time. The prisons are really overcrowded. Yep. And my second thought is, we've got lots of young kids who are going through different stuff at home. They're not going to school. I think if we brought something in like a point, you get 3 goes. If you end up before a court or end up in trouble 3 times, we bring in some kind of national service that they go off. We've got lots of army camps that doesn't have any people. They get 3 ticks and then they go off to a camp where they learn. When they go
so
to school,
3 strikes, and if you commit the 3rd strike, you're going to go straight to the army. I suspect the army, our brilliant non-conscripted army, wouldn't necessarily be happy about receiving not necessarily those who are that enthused or that capable or that willing to defend our democracy. But nevertheless, you make a point which was actually made by a lot of people and a number of people calling in, which is to say we need to deal with the causes of crime, especially with young people, by providing safe spaces, youth clubs, etc., to keep them out of trouble. So thanks for calling. Lucy, I'm going to go to you. You're in Birmingham. What do you make of all of this?
I know it's a really controversial topic, prisons, and whether people are too soft. I think I agree with the comments that were made earlier where, people are going to be released, whether it's early or later, they'll be released at some point, and wouldn't it be safer for everybody if they were rehabilitated? Yep. I actually think that the punishment itself is going to prison, just that act in itself, having your freedoms taken away, your family, your home, your belongings, all of that, that's the punishment. And actually being in prison is the treatment. That should be where the rehabilitation takes place.
Well, I mean, that is a point that a lot of people make until, Lucy, like Anne and others, they get a chance to visit prison. And as Anne correctly, undoubtedly described, what happens once you go to prison, often you're in your cell 23 hours a day. The question is, that is a punishment, your liberty is taken away, but what do you feel, or how do you feel if you're a victim of crime when the person who's perpetrated that crime against you actually comes out of prison more dangerous than when he went in, and more likely to go back to prison, and more importantly, perhaps for you as a victim, perhaps do the same thing to somebody else? I wonder about that, Lucy, but you do make a point that a lot of people feel. Cathy, you're in Lancashire. Do you agree with Lucy?
No, I think we should bring Borstal back. I know somebody who went to Borstal in 1983, and he came out and worked for a big company in Blackpool as a trainee electrician. He became the one of the directors, getting the work in, then left the company, set his own company. It was very, very successful. We need to bring Borstal back.
Well, just to be clear what you're talking about, because some people might know what that means. We're talking about basically prisons for young people. Now, we've got youth offending prisons, but, well, they're actually corrective schools. I'm going to be clear, they were called Borstals. Now, a lot of the time, they weren't as positive for your the friend that you know, Cathy. I'm going to go to you because you're a teacher before the break, Bobby. It's mainly young people that start on that journey into crime. Very quickly, as a teacher, you must have seen this in your schools. What do you see? What do you see as a way of stopping people getting into that cycle?
So again, I've been in schools for 11 years, and some of my older students who were 17, 18 at the time are now in their mid-late 20s, and a few of them have sadly fallen into sort of the criminal justice system. Yeah. With them, it's often education, pretty much all of them, for various reasons, maybe troubled homes, troubled families, and therefore their education is not seen as important. They don't get the qualifications, and therefore they don't see employment for them. And then they fall into the wrong crowds. I think it's like schools have to play a big part in this as well.
Schools and perhaps other spaces to provide an alternative place for kids to find value in themselves and skills and a sense of confidence to go into the world. But thank you for all of your calls on this. Now, later...